Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I have some news for you. I know we're right in the middle of our spring football coverage, but I just got a job offer from a Michigan podcast. So I've cleaned out my desk. Good luck with everything. We'll see you. We'll see you in November.
Now, Tom, we have planned and gone over what this show is going to look like for the next 9 months. And you're telling me, including all of the plans for our Michigan shows, you're telling me you're taking all of these plans, our podcast playbook, if you will, and you're taking them with you to your new Michigan podcast. Is this what I'm hearing?
I think right there, people figured out that we were not actually serious. Us planning something months in advance. Tony, please, Tony, respect the listeners enough to not lie to them.
I won't do it. They wouldn't expect me to do it. And so I'm not going to fail to meet their expectations by thinking too much of them, of myself. So, welcome everybody to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. Had some bonus episodes this week, on Wednesday. Tony Alford goes ahead and leaves. And so we threw our live edition of the Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning episode in that feed. And then threw another one in there on Thursday morning from Garrett Seawright of the Daily Huddle on his thoughts on Tony Alford. So we've shared plenty of thoughts there. So we're going to continue on our series of the Too Deep from the Spring. On Tuesday, we went over the offense. Now it is time to talk about the defense, and maybe if we have time, we'll get into the special teams, Tom. Not that we've seen much there just yet, but defensive end, Tom, let's start there because, boy, there are a ton of questions there. I don't know where they're going to find 4 good defensive ends this spring to, sprinkle through the defense. Obviously, JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer are back. Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry are back. Those 4, it's set. If Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer had gone to the NFL, we know who the starters would be. Almost certainly Caden Curry and Kenyatta Jackson. My question for you is the guys behind those 4. I don't think there are any questions about those 4 guys. Now, we don't know just how good Caden Curry is going to be, just how good Kenyatta Jackson is going to be with, 30 snaps or 40 snaps. But we know they're next in. My question is the guys behind them that we have not seen much of. Mitchell Melton. And basically there's 3 guys. Mitchell Melton, Josh Mickens, Edric Houston. That's not a lot of guys, but you're talking about 5, 6, 7. I think it's interesting that Mickens right now, redshirt freshman, redshirted last year, is listed at 6'3", 233 pounds, which is smaller than Sonny Styles, smaller than Arvell Reese, 2 linebackers. I don't know if that means he's going to figure into the jack role at some point, perhaps, or they just like the fast, speedy guys. But those 3, Tom, a variance of experience, potential, and this is going to be our first good look at Mickens and Houston. Mitchell Melton, we've seen forever. Coaches love that guy. How are you stacking up those 3 right now?
Well, I think going into the spring, you kind of have to have Mitchell Melton at the top of the list among those 3, just because he's been there forever and has, he knows the playbook. He's been in the strength program the longest. I think you kind of have to just sort of almost go by seniority entering the spring. I'll be interested to see where things stand at the end of the spring. I'm not necessarily expecting a big leap. And frankly, I don't know that there's an enormous difference between how many snaps you're going to get if you're guy number 5 versus guy number 6 at defensive end. I don't think there's going to be an enormous gap in how many snaps you're going to get, because it feels like there kind of is a little bit of a dividing line between 4 and 5, where if, one of the starters gets hurt, you're probably going to have kind of a top 3 then, and, probably still a little bit of a gap maybe down to the other 3. But this is a group that I think you're going to be able to get something out of some of them. I mean, you've got a combination of experience. You've got the 5-star true freshman, Edric Houston, who's probably not ready yet and probably not going to be truly, truly ready until maybe even next year to be a 25, 30 snap a game kind of guy. But he's already, big enough. He's coming in at, what is he listed at, 275 or something like that? he's big enough that he could potentially be out there at least, fourth quarter against Akron kind of stuff, get some snaps, start to sort of get up to game speed, all that kind of stuff. They don't need that much out of those guys, which gives them the luxury of, bringing the younger guys along slowly. And if Melton is ready to go and he's missed a bunch of time over the years. So if he's healthy, then you have the luxury of maybe having, an extra guy. It's like two pairs and a spare basically there.
Yeah, I do think Melton is the next guy in. And I wonder how much they even try to fit him in this season as a defensive end and roll more than just the four guys out there, because I think they want to do that with Houston. And right now he's listed at 6'3", 270. I will say it's kind of a throwback that he's going with the jersey number 96. It's on one hand, it's good to see the defensive lineman in the 90s. On the other hand, 96 is not a great number. That's basically a kicking number or punting number at Ohio State, and a walk-on at that. So I'm not trying to lower the expectations for Edric Houston. I'm just saying your number is reminiscent of a walk-on kicker, not even one from Australia, one from right here in America. And anyway, Tom, I don't want to get bogged down on that. Mitchell Melton as that. Yeah, go ahead.
He's someone who you could see him in like a number 11 or something in a year or two, once some of the older guys clear off the roster. Year two, you get a much better number. We have certainly seen that in the past. What was Sonny Styles as a freshman? 20, and then all of a sudden,
20.
boom, he's number 6. Yeah, I think you've got a real opportunity to get. I want to see. I'm always in favor of whoever your biggest starting defensive tackle is. I always want that guy wearing number 1 just because I think that looks great on a defensive tackle. But I doubt that Edric Houston is going to finish his playing career at Ohio State wearing number 96.
Well, and maybe he's waiting for Jack Sawyer to leave and he'll take 33, but now that's a quarterback number, so I don't even know if you really want that. But Mitchell Melton, who has also changed his number over the years, one of those guys at Jack, we'll talk about that a little bit because Jim Knowles did say he would like to get that incorporated and install it in the spring. He said they always have it. James Laurinaitis said the same thing, like they had it last year. It's just implementing it. We know in the past, Knowles has said Mitchell Melton and C.J. Hicks and Arvell Reese were the 3 guys as of like last year that they were looking at. Obviously, I think there's still plenty of reason to have C.J. Hicks involved there, especially with the move of Sonny Styles. But, Tom, I'm going to put you on the spot. Are you expecting that we see at some point this spring the Jack on the field? We will get to see 2 full practices on Saturdays coming up, not in the near future, but in April. And do you think we will see it then? I'm not necessarily expecting to see it in the spring game, but do you think we'll get to see it behind the scenes?
I think we've talked about this enough now without really seeing any kind of meaningful contribution on the field during the season. I kind of am in the I got to see it before I'm willing to, believe it again, because we've heard about it for a while and there's always kind of a reason it hasn't happened. I kind of want to see it actually happen before I invest too much more emotional energy or podcast time on talking about the Jack. I know it's everyone's favorite topic, but I think it's even, I get the sense that even just across the media sphere, it's getting asked about a lot less. Like the first year, that was like the only thing anyone could talk about. And then we didn't really see it. And then we didn't really see it last year. And now I think I'm going to, fool me once, fool me twice, whatever, fool me 3 times is, I'm going to wait before I actually believe it is truly, really going to happen. But maybe.
Yeah, maybe. It's the new bullet, which was the new star. Like anything new or different, you're like, oh, let's just hyper focus on this. The H-back, the Percy Harvin role, which eventually, after 4 years, becomes the Curtis Samuel role, and you can move on past the Percy Harvin thing and this quest. Last year, like you said, there were reasons they didn't do it last year. We just Mitchell Melton was injured at some point last year. I don't remember exactly. Was it the start of spring or the end of spring? Like his injury had something to do with it, them not doing much of it that I recall, but then we never saw it anyway after that. So clearly that wasn't the only reason we didn't see it. And I'm a maybe on this one. I'm not a no that we won't, just because Knowles has talked about wanting to do it, and they've got enough guys to do it this year if they wanted to. But it's just a matter of do we need to do it right now, or should we get these younger guys up to speed because you've got so many veterans that won't need snaps. Let's move to the defensive tackles, where you've got a good mix of veterans and younger guys. 3-tech, obviously that's going to be Tyleik Williams. Behind him, though, I think it's going to be interesting to see, Tywone Malone, fourth-year junior, has the experience on the younger guys like a Will Smith, Jason Moore. Cade McDonald played some there last year as a big 3-tech, but we know Larry Johnson. Tyleik Williams is like 6'3", 325 pounds, is a 3-tech. Mike Hall, 6'2", 285 pounds, is a nose tackle. Like what we might think of as a nose tackle and what Larry Johnson might think are not always on the same page. But I think it's going to be interesting to watch the progression of those guys. Tywone Malone's got some young guys nipping at his heels, and this is going to be his first full spring at Ohio State, focusing on just football. And of course, last year's first full year of fall, just focusing on that. So he's almost like a young player in himself. So I do wonder if he takes a jump, or if it is what it is with him and the younger guys start picking up speed. Like Will Smith, everybody loves him and his work ethic. He was injured last year. What does he look like this spring when he's healthy?
Yeah, that's one of those great questions that we are hoping to have a much better answer on a month from now than we do right now, because he was hurt all of last year. Jason Moore was another guy who came out of high school, and you heard lots of good things about him coming out of high school in Maryland, and then really didn't get to see him, and he was kind of banged up at various times last fall as well. So you got a couple real kind of unknowns there. And then Tywone Malone, as you said, he's going into his fourth season, but he's really not, normally with a fourth year guy, you think, okay, you're kind of and is what you are what you are at that point kind of guy in your fourth year. Malone might be a little bit of an exception because, as you said, was not here for spring last year, and he spent his 2 years at Ole Miss splitting time between baseball and football. So he was never full-time with football there either. So, and we're going to talk about another guy who might be, not the traditional development curve in college when we get to the nose tackles in a minute, because he's from a different country. But for Malone, I think there might be more ceiling there than you typically would expect from a fourth year guy. So, I think there's a lot of possibility there behind Tyleik Williams. Tyleik Williams finally came on and showed, what I think everyone was sort of waiting for multiple years from him. He finally showed that last year. So you're feeling pretty good about the top spot there on the depth chart. And then behind him, there's lots of possibility, lots of promise, lots of intrigue. But we're going to find out hopefully a lot more about all three of those guys in the coming weeks.
Yeah, and with the experience that you have with Tyleik Williams at 3-tech, Ty Hamilton at nose tackle, both of those guys can play either spot. So then it becomes very similar to other positions where who is that number 3 guy? Like, who is the third best defensive tackle? Is it Hero Kanu as a nose tackle? Is it Tywone Malone as a 3-tech? And then as you move guys in and out, you can slide Tyleik Williams over if you want to get Hero Kanu in, or, you can mix and match as Larry Johnson gets all of these guys cross-trained. Moving to nose tackle with Ty Hamilton, he started 7 games last year, I believe, at nose tackle. You lose Mike Hall, you keep him. He had better stats if you want to get into the statistical analysis of the competition with him and Mike Hall. Mike Hall, we know, had some explosive plays and was a threat and taken very seriously by offensive line and game offensive coordinators. Ty Hamilton has been underrated, I think, and that's the Hamilton way, though. Devon Hamilton was underrated until he was, really well thought of as a fifth-year guy. Hero Kanu, Tom, to me is interesting because when Jim Knowles talks about wanting to play maybe a double eagle, a bear front, he mentioned Hero Kanu as the nose tackle in that, the double eagle, the bear front. You might remember it from such games as the Virginia Tech loss in 2014 when Virginia Tech came out in that and Ohio State had very little answer for it. But requires a nose tackle, which would be Hero Canoe, and then you got 2 3-techs on either side of him, on both sides of him. So Tyleek Williams and Ty Hamilton or whatever. And then he talked about JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer wanting to teach them to play some outside linebacker. So that would be your 5-man front. But the fact that he's thinking, hey, can Hero Canoe be the anchor of that, I think is pretty impressive. And we saw him start to play more and more last year. This, as you mentioned, he is from Germany. This is his 3rd season. They might be expecting a nice little jump from him this year if they're already saying, he's to the point where we can even consider these things at this point.
Right. I think if you're thinking about making that kind of a change, and, it's not like that's going to be their base defense.
Right.
They're not going to be running 5 defensive linemen out there on, third and 9 or, every single 1st and 10 by any means. But if you're thinking about making that kind of a fundamental change to, what have they ever run that outside of like real goal line situations? I can't ever remember them running that really in the last, 5-10 years. So if you're looking at that and you feel like that guy, Hero Canoe can be, kind of the tip of the spear on that, that tells me a lot, again, and let's see how much we actually see it in practice. Let's see how much we actually see it during games. But that, I think, is a pretty good indication that, okay, if you're starting to maybe make some plans around this guy, very clearly this guy is part of your plan for this season. And, you've got Caden McDonald there behind him, behind Ty Hamilton as well. This is a spot where you've got, probably, as you said, I have long thought Ty Hamilton is maybe the single most underrated player on the team, just because he just sort of gets forgotten about, because you had the 4 2021 defensive linemen, which was just, it's a very easy shorthand. It's a very easy narrative. Oh, JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer and Mike Hall and Tyleek Williams. And they were all, 3 of them are still there, all big, have made some big plays over the years, memorable, splashy plays. And so it's very easy to go, yep. And those are the 4 defensive linemen. And then there's Ty Hamilton sort of like standing right there in the background. Like, hey, I do stuff too. It's like, oh, yeah, right. Yeah, the guy who started like half of the games last year. Right. But, much like Devon Hamilton came in with a very, very, not a 5-star recruiting profile by any means. I think they might have both been. Ty Hamilton might have been a 4-star. Devon Hamilton was a 3-star. He was ranked like the 1,000th player in the nation, something like that. And then he went on to an NFL career. Ty Hamilton is just seemingly sort of following in that path where not a lot of spotlight, not a name that a ton of fans would, if you said name an Ohio State defensive lineman, I think 5% or less would name Ty Hamilton first. He's just not the guy who's like in the spotlight, but he's just been a very effective player for them for so long. Hero Canoe, as you said, from Germany, so just doesn't have the background of playing youth football since he was age 6 or anything like that. So the learning curve there is probably a little bit behind where it normally would have been. He's now obviously catching up and in a point where he's ready to make an impact. And Caden McDonald was someone who, as a true freshman, was out there. He was out there a little bit on defense. They had him out there a little bit on offense. You just kind of saw him out there, and it was just kind of like, you could tell that's a guy the coaching staff looks at and goes, this is a football player, and you know what coaches mean when they say this is a football player. They're all football players, but it's like, this is a football player. We got to get him out there. That's usually a pretty good sign that this is going to be someone you're going to see a bunch of in the future as well.
So I just went and looked at the Hamilton brothers to get the exact numbers. Tom, Devon Hamilton, the number 993rd player in the nation in the class of 2015, the number 63 defensive tackle. And that year, Tom, the recruiting rankings believed there were 45 players in Ohio better than Devon Hamilton. I doubt it. And then Ty Hamilton, the number 757 player in the 2020 class, the number 33 strong side defensive end, and the number 24 player in Ohio. Much more respectful than the number 46 player in Ohio from Devon Hamilton. Now I just want to go through and look at all of the names that were listed ahead of him and just shake my head in amazement. Now, you've got some guys, Tom, as I just clicked, Draymond Jones, the number 6 player. Jerome Baker, the number 3 player, Justin Hilliard, the number 1 player, Denzel Ward. Boy, this is a pretty good class in Ohio. The number 10 player, the number 13 player. I'm not sure if you guys remember this guy, Joey Burrow, the number 13 player in the state of Ohio. But boy, a lot of names here, and then you get a whole bunch of who, and then you finally get to Devon Hamilton there. So good job, all of you recruiting rankings gurus on that one.
Yeah, that feels like if you scroll down that list, you're going to start sounding like an owl after a while. Like who? Yeah, you always have some names, but was there anyone ranked above him who went to like Bowling Green or Kent State or somewhere like that? I'm going to guess there is more than a little Maction above Devon Hamilton on that ranking list.
Well, I will give you one, Tom. Jeff Christian, cornerback from Cincinnati Coleraine, went to OU, that being Ohio. Chris Green from Toledo Central Catholic, the number 34 player, went to Toledo. And I believe that is the highest ranked MAC commit, unless you consider all of the guys that went to Michigan State or Kentucky. Remember CJ Conrad, tight end?
Maybe.
Ohio State fans wanted him. He ended up going to Kentucky. So we should just do an entire show, honestly, on the 2015 recruiting class. Because back in the day, Urban Meyer hated that class. Like, he was like, these guys just aren't developing. And then finally, some of them sprouted. Like, Jerome Baker was fantastic. Joe Burrow obviously did what he did. Devon Hamilton did what he did. Maybe we'll do a Wayback Machine. Hey, that sounds really good for June and July. Let's go back and look at this particular recruiting class. We've got like 30 of them to look back on. So, boy, we got our entire summer set. See, who said we didn't plan months ahead, Tom? You are a liar, sir.
I take it all back. I apologize. We are nothing if not fastidious about our planning for every show. Tony, I have a great idea for the morning show for October 13th for this year. We'll talk about it off the air.
Okay, cool. I'll just have my calendar ready. Let's move to linebacker, where there's been some news there this spring. Sonny Styles moves to Will, where he is competing with CJ Hicks, which to me, I think this is pretty fantastic. Just the pressure on both of those guys, but also the competition between those two guys. Sonny Styles starts 12 games last year. He's an experienced guy. Going to come right in, and you would expect him to just slide on in there. CJ Hicks has been biding his time. We hear good things about him, but also, we also hear that the damning with faint praise. Like, well, once he learns the defense, it's like, well, he's also a junior now. That shouldn't be the issue that it seems to be. So now this is CJ Hicks's first real opportunity to start, because frankly, you're not going to it's going to be very difficult to unseat a returning starter as a freshman or as a sophomore. He was not able to do that with Steel Chambers. Now you have this position right dead ahead of you, and they bring in Sonny Styles to compete with you. That either is going to force you to take things more seriously, or you're going to break from that. Are you going to do the Carson Hinsman thing where he went and had a really good offseason? CJ Hicks, by the account of James Laurinaitis, has had a good offseason. But this is going to be a fascinating competition to watch. And by no means does the loser suddenly miss out on playing time this year, because those two guys have some versatility to them, that you can do some different things with them. Jim Knowles has talked about the Sam linebacker position and things like that. But this is going to be one of the more entertaining things to watch this spring. And in terms of the two deep that we've seen so far, it has been CJ Hicks with the ones every single time that I've seen. Sonny Styles with the twos every single time. At some point, obviously, Sonny Styles is going to get some time with the ones, though.
Oh, for sure. I think Sonny Styles is going to play, and the position that he plays, maybe it's going to be Will, maybe it's going to be something that's not technically on this chart right now. It's going to be the is he also kind of working in as a third linebacker, as a Sam, or is he working in as a hey, bring back the star, what the heck? Maybe he's a Leo, I don't know. But he's going to be on the field somewhere. I don't think he's going to sit this year. And CJ Hicks is at the point where, okay, he's now been around long enough that he should be up to speed on the defense, and he The athleticism is clearly there with him. This is, this is one of these really good position battles where there's plenty of talent there. And so you should end up, I don't know that there's a bad outcome here with these two guys. And frankly, I think with as much of a grind as this year's extended schedule is going to be, with potentially as many as 4 college football playoff games, plus a Big Ten championship game, plus the 12 regular season games, I think you're going to need a couple guys there. It's going to be a benefit if they can sort of split those snaps between those guys to a certain extent, or use them maybe more situationally. Maybe CJ Hicks is the early down guy and Sonny Styles is the late down guy or the passing down guy in some circumstances. You can divide those reps up however you want to do it, but it feels like that there's just so much talent there that whatever the outcome is and however they end up dividing those reps up, it's going to be probably a pretty good outcome for Ohio State.
It's also a huge insurance situation for the Buckeyes, because if you look at their defense, the weak link, you're like, well, it's the will linebacker, because you don't know what it's going to be. Like before Sonny Styles moved, CJ Hicks is a 5-star guy, should be good, but to this point has not played much, so there is a concern there. You bring in Sonny Styles, you start to feel a whole lot better about the situation, and we'll see how this goes for both of them. But I think the competition will help CJ Hicks, and like you said, there are different things they can do. Remember last year with Jim Knowles calling Sonny Styles, he had this position known as strike, where he's like, yeah, not necessarily this or this. It's thinking of calling it this, calling it strike, just because really it's just because that way it's not nickel, it's not Sam, and it's if you use it this year, that way it's like he's not necessarily the will right now. It's the strike. It's one of these things where you're just trying to label something, and to label something that has many different labels. I think now maybe just call him the subfolder, or is this the main folder? And then he's got a lot of subfolders underneath him.
Well, Tony, if you're to the boundary side, that position is called the John Wick. And if you're out to the field side, it's called the Jason Bourne. It's going to be great to have TV people looking at their monitors going, my goodness, that's Jason Bourne. And, that'll be, I think it's going to be a great season of TV coverage as well as football.
I'm here for it. Maybe we can just start implementing that with the spring game with the Big Ten Network people. Mike linebacker, that is Cody Simon. He has started there in the past. The level of confidence is very high. He's been with the ones as expected. The story here is the comeuppance. The rise.
That's not what that word means.
Should though. It should. For Gabe Powers, and the attention that he has gotten from Ryan Day, from James Laurinaitis, from Jim Knowles, about how much he has grown from this time last year during the season and then until now. The way people are talking about him, obviously Gabe Powers is starting. It feels to me like they're going to try to, Cody Simon is starting, sorry. They're going to try to find ways to get Gabe Powers in the game this year, especially when you consider James Laurinaitis talking to us last month saying, I wish I would have played Cody more last year. And of course, the 15 games or whatever. I'm starting to feel like you might see some series from series to series where you've got Gabe Powers out there, or you've got him out there on a couple of first downs, just because they need to integrate people more. And I talked to Jim Knowles about that. Like, they are talking about that already in terms of more rotation, and not just necessarily rotation, but getting younger guys, more guys playing basically. And Gabe Powers, the way everybody's talking about him, seems like this is going to be a pretty good spring for him.
Yeah, he's another one where you hear the name often enough from enough different people, and it's kind of like, okay, so this is not just one person saying something. And especially when a name gets brought up, when it's not, hey, what have you seen from fill in the blank? When a name gets brought up kind of unasked about, that's when it's like, okay, this is probably something meaningful. And, Powers, this is now his 3rd year as well. And he is, Tony, stop me if you've heard this before in terms of football cliches. He is literally the son of a coach, Tony. So he's probably got some pretty good awareness, which is one of the real big job descriptions for that Mike linebacker. That's probably going to be the person wearing that green dot helmet and making the defensive calls and all that kind of stuff. So he's probably, you can kind of check that box to a certain degree already just based on the background there. And, the physical development, he's now been there for 3 years. He was someone who, during the recruiting process, there was at least some conversation about would he grow into a defensive end or would they keep him at linebacker? They've obviously kept him at linebacker, but he's someone who's, big and strong enough that he should be able to stand up to the Michigan running game and, some of the bigger challenges you're going to face there. So that, you've kind of got the physical size there. You've got the mental acuity there to run the defense. He feels like someone who's going to be, even if he's not a starter this year, you're probably setting him up to be the starter in 2025. And, as you said, I think that starts with rotating guys and having, the way they ran running backs for a number of years where it's like, okay, this is your drive. You're kind of rotating guys, keeping guys fresh. This is an opportunity to not only keep guys fresh for this year, but also prepare him even more for 2025, which seems pretty win-win.
Gabe Powers listed as 6'4", 242, also another player a little bit bigger than Joshua Mickens. Nickelback, your favorite band, but that's another show. That's another summer show.
You take that back right now.
Jordan Hancock, as Ohio State's nickel defensive back, that's a given. He is the number one there. Lorenzo Styles has been playing there. We've learned that Jermaine Matthews has gotten some time there. I think, again, this feels to me like Jermaine Matthews here, I think we would both agree that he can play this probably pretty seamlessly. Having him there with Lorenzo Styles maybe is just some insurance in case Lorenzo Styles can't do it. Then you know that you've got Jermaine Matthews. But is this also another thing where your number 3 corner is also your number 2 nickel, like it was last year with Jordan Hancock? But this is a pretty deep group right now with what they've got. And there's obviously some significant talent there. And then if Lorenzo Styles can be that number 2 guy, and that's great. I also think Jermaine Matthews getting some reps there is also probably because he's the dime. If we're talking about, they're bringing out an extra defensive back, it would seem to me that's when you go to your next guy up. I think Jermaine Matthews is the next guy up, but I'm not sure he's the number 2 nickel just because they don't want to take him away from the outside stuff too much,
Yeah, that feels like he's not going to be the nickel. Maybe if Jordan Hancock got hurt, for example, and you needed someone to be there full time, maybe that he steps in there as kind of the next man up. But, if you've got your healthy starters, having the versatility to maybe play in there a little bit is not bad. But I don't think that's where his ultimate future probably lies for, as a permanent spot. He feels like he's going to replace one of those guys on the outside next year. But he's, he, as you said, if they go to the dime, you got 6 defensive backs out there. He is probably your 6th best defensive back, almost certainly your 6th best defensive back among, on this current roster. So yeah, I think you've got that, you have that diagnosed correctly. That's probably where he fits in. But, if he just has the ability to do it, he doesn't even have to do it. If he just has the ability to do it, it allows you, potentially you can disguise some coverages if you want to using that kind of thing. It just gives you more depth. It gives you more options. It gives you the opportunity to take Jordan Hancock off the field for a drive or let him get a breather if he's been, had to run a couple streaks with the receiver, with the slot guy a few times. Like having a little more option, having a little more opportunity for Jermaine Matthews to get on the field, also not a bad thing.
Yeah, and if they did lose Jordan Hancock and you bring one of those 2 guys, I wonder if we then see more of a substitution pattern with a big nickel, Sonny Styles, as that, or they go to like a 4-3 and they bring in the Sam, which would be Sonny Styles in that kind of situation, or CJ Hicks, who is also learning the Sam position. Because Matthews at this point, not as big as Jordan Hancock, probably not. You don't ask him to take on too much of those early downs or the short yardage downs as a nickel. Lorenzo Styles is a bigger player. Maybe he'd be more equipped for that. Jordan Hancock put on 10 pounds to be able to handle the every down situation this year. So it's a legit thing to concern yourself with, but obviously getting a look at Jermaine Matthews there, because again, I do believe he is the would be the next guy in, and also you want them all to be able to do different things and match up. So good looking there. The rest of the corners, Tom, also pretty fair. I think Jermaine Matthews is the number 3. Probably Calvin Simpson Hunt is the number 4 corner in that group. If they've already if they've already decided to play Lorenzo Styles at nickel more, that seems to me like they really like Calvin Simpson Hunt at that outside corner, because if there was if one of those guys was the better one, it seems like they would stay at corner and the other guy would move to nickel. Am I off? I'm not saying I'm exactly right, but am I wrong in thinking that?
I don't think you're wrong in thinking that. And, Lorenzo Styles, what's Lorenzo Styles listed at? He's north of 6 feet, isn't he? I mean, that's
6'1",
that,
195.
yeah, 6'1", 195. I mean, that's pretty big for a nickel. So that's not, that's not necessarily he's the prototypical nickel, so you'd have to put him inside. That's typically where you put, the shorter, quicker guy in a lot of cases. So yeah, I think there might be something to that. And the other thing that I look at in terms of figuring out, where does Calvin Simpson Hunt fit in the depth chart is you look at last season and he was a non-factor. And all of a sudden you started seeing him earlier in games and you started seeing him before some other guys. And I think Calvin Simpson Hunt had probably passed Jair Brown pretty clearly on the depth chart, which led to Jair Brown transferring to LSU. He's someone who, you heard exciting stuff about coming out of high school. He was a track star and, they really liked him, but I don't believe he was in for spring last year. I'm almost positive he wasn't. So, got a little bit of a late start last year, but then came on real strong at the end of the year. He feels like, I don't know if the difference between Jermaine Matthews and Calvin Simpson Hunt is that one was in for spring last year and one wasn't, but it certainly feels like Calvin Simpson Hunt is, not terribly, terribly far behind Jermaine Matthews. And, if he's to the point where he's ready to be a starter at some point this year, then you got a couple pretty good outside corners for the 2025 season.
Moving to free safety, where we can talk a little bit about Caleb Downs, I feel like that's just all taken for granted, or not taken for granted, but understood that he's fine there. He's the starter. Everything is going to be good there. Behind him, Malik Hartford is injured, but he's still doing some early stuff because they're not doing anything physical. No physical contact that we've seen that they'd be doing in the first week of practice. And again, that will pick up maybe this next weekend when they're finally able to get some pads on. But behind him, I've seen Jalen McClain, a freshman at free safety. I don't know at this point. I haven't seen enough to see where Cedric Hawkins is. That's kind of my question. I thought maybe would he be at nickel, but he'll be somewhere in there at safety. But with Caleb Downs and Malik Hartford, I think they're completely fine at free safety this year. But in terms of what we've seen this spring, what I've seen is I've seen Jalen McClain pointing people around as that free safety, steering people around, which I think is good for a true freshman who's just come in to be able to tell people, no, get back over there, get back out over there. It shows a good level of understanding, and also the coaches have the trust in him that he can make those calls. But that's going to be eventually Malik Hartford again. But this spring, it would be obviously Malik Hartford's going to do as much as he can, even though Ryan Day said he's out. A lot of the guys that they've said are out, we're still practicing so far because there's no reason not to. But this pretty good opportunity for Jalen McClain. Obviously, Caleb Downs still needs to get accustomed to everybody and everything. They say he knows the playbook, so that won't be too bad. But your thoughts there on free safety?
Well, it is an opportunity for sure for Jalen McClain because he would, if Malik Hartford was 100% full go, Jalen McClain is not the number 2 free safety. That is pretty obviously going to be Caleb Downs and Malik Hartford working there. And Hartford was another guy who came out as a true freshman last year and was pretty impressive and was out there earlier than you would have expected him to be as a true freshman. So, him being banged up, when they say out, sometimes they actually mean like, yes, this guy has a broken ankle and is really on crutches on the sidelines and really out. And sometimes it means, well, he'll be out there for individual drills, or he'll be out there, on non-padded days. But then once you're in pads or you're running 7-on-7, then he's not out there. And it seems like maybe Malik Hartford's a little more in that latter group. So you might see him a little bit here and there, but not necessarily in the spring game, for example. So, this is an opportunity for Jalen McClain to get more reps, take on more responsibility much earlier in his career than you probably would have expected. And you're also working with Caleb Downs, and Caleb Downs is, I'm sure, a little ahead of Jalen McLean, just having played college for a year and played in a Nick Saban type defense for a year. That's going to be that's a pretty good finishing school if you're a defensive back. And so you have someone like Caleb Downs to, be working alongside, learning from, figuring out, Caleb Downs is probably doing things the right way. So if you watch how Caleb Downs is doing it, that's probably not a bad guide for how you should be doing it. So this is a good opportunity for him, but it's also probably a relatively low stress opportunity because, ultimately a lot of stuff would have to go bad for him to be to get thrust into the starting free safety spot this fall. So this is really kind of a spring of opportunity for him without a ton of pressure, I would say.
Then strong safety, Lathan Ransom, Jihad Carter. I'm going to assume Cedric Bonsu will be in there, or Jaden Bonsu will be in there as well. He's a pretty big kid. He was a big safety, listed now at 6'2", 207. Lathan Ransom full go, but we'll kind of ease into things, ease out of things as a senior. Jihad Carter will do what he does as he is that backup. And this is pretty set. I don't know that we need to spend too much time on this, Tom, with those two, because you got some younger guys in there that could get involved, and these fourth-year senior Lathan Ransom, fifth-year senior Lathan Ransom, fifth-year senior Jihad Carter. Don't know that those two guys need a ton of reps at this point.
No, I would not think that your veteran safety guys need a ton of reps. This is, Jihad Carter, we haven't really seen a whole heck of a lot of Jihad Carter, but he's been in this Jim Knowles defense now for a year. Lathan Ransom has been in this Jim Knowles defense for a couple of years. So these are guys who I think job number one is keep both of these guys healthy and ready to start, the season, because they should be more or less ready. So, this is another one where, yeah, you're going to see those guys out there, but this is just, this is a very big spring for a lot of guys. We did shows before the start of the spring where, oh boy, this is, the 9 Buckeyes with the most to gain this spring or with the most on the line this spring. Yeah, Lathan Ransom is certainly not on that list. Jihad Carter, yeah, I mean, he's I'm sure going to want to try and earn a bigger role this year, and maybe he can earn some kind of a rotational spot in there. But these are guys who I think can come into the spring and just focus on, learning the playbook, figuring out the new, not learning the playbook, but, making sure you understand your role on all of these different plays and helping all the younger guys and that kind of stuff. These are not guys who are going to be necessarily in a place where they need to take a ton of reps this spring.
Then we'll quickly close. I'm just going to run through what we've seen on special teams this far. And Tom, feel free to jump in and correct me at any point. That's the only time I'm ever going to say this on the show. Kicking right now, Jaden Fielding. Haven't seen anybody else. Really haven't seen much kicking as it is. Joe McGuire punting along with Wayne State transfer Hadi Jawad, but that's going to be Joe McGuire. And then that competition will kick up in fall camp once Nick Clardy gets there and enrolls. Long snapping, still John Furlman. Kickoff return, we have seen no kickoff returns to this point. Punt return, we've seen just about everybody back there. But that's probably going to be Jaden Ballard or Brandon Innes. Maybe Emeka Ibuka just to catch the ball. Maybe Carnell Tate. But I don't know that there's a betting favorite punt returner right now. Jaden Ballard did it at the end of last year, did it for most of last year with Emeka Ibuka's injury. But when Emeka was back, it was still Jaden Ballard. Now with Emeka healthy, is it going to be him again? Because during this spring, they're just going to continue to roll like 7 guys through there. But I don't know. Is there a betting favorite at this point, in your opinion?
It always feels to me like the punt returner is a lot of times one of the younger, talented receivers who they feel like they can trust, but who isn't necessarily getting a ton of opportunities on offense. And that's kind of true with the kick return as well. So yeah, I would say Jaden Ballard or Brandon Innes maybe, because, if you've got Emeka Ibuka back there, and he's just back there to catch the ball, I don't know that, the upside is worth the potential downside. If he gets drilled on a kick return, a punt return, and is, misses a bunch of time, that's going to be a real stupid way to, you know, you got 6 yard. What are they getting on punt returns at this point? What was the longest punt return last year? Did they have one that was 20 yards? Maybe, that the upside on punt returns with the way they have handled them over the last few years is just not that great. So I think you're going to put someone a little younger who they feel like they can trust back there. So I would say Ballard or Innes maybe is your most likely guy there. Kick return, we saw Chip Trayanum back there last year. We saw Xavier Johnson back there last year. So again, I think you're looking at, is that a James Peoples? Is that a Sam Williams-Dixon? Is that a Brandon Innes? It's kind of one of those young, talented receivers or running backs who maybe is not in the regular rotation on, as one of the top 3 guys or 4 guys or whatever. So probably someone along those lines, but this is Ohio State. There's not a shortage of real talented young skill players. So the list is pretty long.
Yeah, no, they did not have a single return of 20 yards or more last year, only 1 in 2022, and had a whopping 4 in 2021. My suggestion, I'm hearing a lot about this kid, this young guy, Jeremiah Smith. Maybe just let him have
he seems like someone who's going to have potentially, and I realize we're just breaking all of our own rules here, but he feels like someone who might have enough role on the offense that you don't want to put him out there on kick returns. But like as I'm saying this, I'm in my head seeing was it Zachariah Branch for USC going back and just like sprinting down the field and having a bunch of kick returns for them last year. So I don't know, maybe I'm talking myself out of this even as I'm answering your question.
David Boston in 1996 as a true freshman, 32 punt returns for 297 yards. That's a 9.3 average, with famously a touchdown against Pitt. So I'm just saying, if we're already going to call him the next David Boston, get us started on punt returns.
With 8 guys out there, I will add. What if the great moments in Ohio State football history? And hey Tony, if you're trying to keep guys fresh, trying to keep the number of reps down, if you've only got 7 blockers out there on punt returning, still able to return a punt for a touchdown, pretty good for the special teams, and also pretty good for getting guys an extra snap of rest.
Yep. And as I've said here on the show before, I did not get to see that. Even though I was at that game, I was already on my way back to the apartment as that touchdown was happening. So we heard it somewhere on Woodruff. We knew something was happening and did not get to see it until later. But anyway, that will do it for us. I want to thank you as always for tuning in. If you have not yet hit the thumbs up on this video, please do so. If you've not yet subscribed to us at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle, do so. We're on a push for the 20,000th subscriber. You're not going to get anything, but you will get to subscribe for us for free. So that's a fantastic prize in and of itself. BuckeyeHuddle.com. You can also find us there as join, become a member. It is a fantastic way to support what we do here and there. So thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys later.